to listen. The last verse in the book of Judges says, and I quote, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes." Is that a good description of our own time? So here is a true story paraphrased from the Washington Post. Let your imaginations go with this story. A man emerged from the metro at the L'Enfant Plaza station and positioned himself against a wall outside a trash basket. By most measures, he was nondescript. He was a youngish man in jeans, a long-sleeve T-shirt, and a Washington Nationals baseball cap. And from a small case, he removed a violin. Placing the open case at his feet, he threw in it a few dollars in pocket change as seed money, and then he began to play. It was 7:51 a.m. on a Friday in January, the middle of the morning rush hour, and in the next 43 minutes, as the violinist performed 6 classical pieces, 1,097 people passed by. Almost all of them were on the way to work, which meant for almost all of them a government job. L'Enfant Plaza is at the nucleus of Federal Washington. Each passerby had a quick choice to make, one familiar to commuters in any urban time where the occasional street performer is part of the cityscape. Do you stop and listen? Or do you hurry past with a blend of guilt and perhaps some frustration or irritation? Do you throw in a buck just to be polite? Does your decision change if the musicians are really bad? Well, what if they're really good? Do you have time for beauty? What is the moral mathematics of the moment? And on that Friday, those private questions would be answered in an unusually public way because no one knew it, but the fiddler standing against a bare wall outside the metro in an indoor arcade at the top of the escalators was one of the finest classical musicians in the world, playing some of the most elegant music ever written on one of the most valuable violins ever made. His performance was arranged by the Washington Post as an experiment in context, perception, and priorities, as well as an unblinking assessment of public taste. In a crass setting, and at an inconvenient time, would beauty transcend? Well, what Joshua Bell played were masterpieces that have endured for centuries on their brilliance alone. At one time, child prodigy Joshua Bell is an internationally acclaimed virtuoso, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. 3 days before he appeared at this metro station, he filled the house at Boston Symphony Hall. Interview magazine once said, his playing does nothing less than tell human beings why they bother to live. Well, Bell got his first music lessons when he was a 4-year-old. His parents decided that formal training might be a good idea after they saw that their son had strung rubber bands across his dresser drawers and was replicating classical tunes by ear, moving drawers in and out to vary the pitch. All right. They noticed, okay? They heard. But on that day, Joshua Bell was just another street musician, competing for the attention of busy people on their way to work. The event had been described to him as a test of whether, in an incongruous context, ordinary people would recognize genius. The violin that he was playing is called the Gibson X Huberman, handcrafted in 1713 by none other than Antonio Stradivari, during the Italian master's golden period, when he had access to the finest spruce, maple, and willow, and when his technique had been refined to perfection. When Bell shows his Strad to people, he holds the instrument gingerly by its neck and resting it on a knee, and he said, he made this to perfect thickness at all parts. If you shaved off a millimeter of wood at any point, it would totally imbalance the sound. This, he says, has never been refinished. That's the original varnish. And people attribute aspects to the sound to the varnish. Each maker had their own secret formula, he says. The price tag is reported to be about $3.5 million. Well, Bell decided to begin with Chaconne by Johann Sebastian Bach. He calls it not just one of the greatest pieces of music ever written, but one of the greatest achievements of any person in history. It's a spiritually powerful piece, structurally perfect, and it is also considered one of the most difficult violin pieces to master. Many try, few succeed, because in part it's exhaustingly long, 14 minutes, and consists entirely of single, succinct musical progression repeated in dozens of variations to create a complex architecture of sound. Composed around 1720, on the eve of the European Enlightenment, it is said to be a celebration of the breadth of human possibility. 19th century composer Johannes Brahms once wrote of Bach's piece, "On a small instrument, the man writes a whole world of the deepest thoughts and most powerful feelings. If I imagined that I could have created, even conceived the piece, I'm quite certain that the excess of excitement and earth-shattering experience would have driven me out of my mind." That's the piece Bell started with, right? 3 minutes went by before something happened. 63 people had already passed when finally there was a breakthrough of sorts. A middle-aged man altered his gait for a split second, turning his head to notice that there seemed to be some guy playing music. The man kept walking, but it was something, at least. A half minute later, Joshua Bell got his first donation. A woman threw in a buck and scooted off. It was not until 6 minutes into the performance that somebody actually stood against a wall and listened. In the 3/4 of an hour that Bell played, 7 people stopped what they were doing to hang around and take in the performance at least for a minute. 27 actually gave money, most of them on the run, for a total of $32 and change. Not a bad night, right? $32? Okay. That left 1,070 people who hurried by, many only 3 feet away, few even turning to look. It was all videotaped. I'm not making this up, okay? By a hidden camera. People scurried by, cups of coffee in their hands, cell phones in their ears, ID tags slapping at their bellies, a grim, macabre dance that looked like indifference and busyness. The fiddler's movements remain, however, fluid and graceful, unseen, unheard, otherworldly, almost as if he's not really there. A ghost. But if you watch the video, you begin to see something else. He is the one who is real. They are the ghosts. So if a great musician plays great music, but no one hears, was he or she really any good? It's an old philosophical debate, older actually than the one about the tree in the forest, because Plato weighed in on it, and philosophers for 2 millennia afterward. What is beauty? Is it a measurable fact? Is it an opinion? Or is it a little of each, colored by the immediate state of mind of the observer, as philosopher Immanuel Kant says? Well, playing the violin looks all-consuming mentally and physically, but Bell says that for him, the mechanics of it are partly second nature, cemented by practice and muscle memory. It's like a juggler, he says, who can keep those balls in play while actually interacting with a crowd. What he's mostly thinking about as he plays is capturing emotion as a narrative. Bell says, when you play a violin piece, you're telling a story. And he adds, it was a strange feeling that people were actually ignoring me. Context matters. Immanuel Kant said the same thing. He took beauty seriously. In his critique of aesthetic judgment, Kant argued that one's ability to appreciate beauty is related to one's ability to make moral judgments. But there was a caveat. Kant believed that to properly appreciate beauty, the viewing conditions must be optimal. In other words, optimal doesn't mean heading to work or focusing on your report to your boss. So if you watched the video from the moment that Belle's bow first touched the strings, this is part of what you would see. White guy, khakis, leather jacket, briefcase, early 30s. John Mortensen is on the final leg of his daily bus to metro commute from his home, and he's heading up the long escalator at the plaza. So like most everyone who passes by Joshua Bell this day, Mortensen he gets a good earful of music before he has his first look at the musician. And like most of them, he notes that it sounds pretty good. But like very few of them, when he gets to the top, Mortensen is the first person to stop. For the first time in his life, he lingers to listen to a street musician. And he stays 3 minutes as 94 people pass by. And when he leaves to help plan contingency budgets for the Department of Energy, there's another first. John Mortensen gives a street musician money. Then a couple of minutes into it, something revealing happens. A woman and her preschooler emerge from the escalator, and the woman is walking briskly, and therefore so is the child. She's got his hand. I had a time crunch, recalls Sharon Parker, an IT director for a federal agency. I had an 8:30 training class, and first I had to rush Evan off to his preschool, rush back to work, and then to the training facility in the basement. Evan is 3. You see him clearly in the video, and he keeps twisting around to look at Joshua Bell as he's being propelled toward the door. There was a musician, Parker says, and my son was intrigued. He wanted to pull over and listen, but I was rushed for time. So Parker does what she has to do. She deftly moves her body between Evan's and Bell's, cutting off her son's line of sight. And as they exit the arcade, Evan can still be seen craning his neck to look. And when Parker is told what she walked out on, she laughs and says, Evan is very smart. Well, one of my favorite past national poet laureates, Billy Collins, once observed that all babies are born with a knowledge of poetry because the sound and rhythm of the mother's heart is in iambic meter. And then Collins said, life then slowly starts to choke the poetry out of us. And it may be true with music too. Now, there was no ethnic or demographic pattern to distinguish the people who stayed to watch Joshua Bell and to listen to him, or the ones who gave money, from that vast majority who were hurrying on past. Whites, blacks, Asians, young and old, women and men were no different. But the behavior of one demographic remained absolutely consistent. Every single time a child walked past, he or she tried to stop and watch and listen. And every single time, a parent scooted the kid away. People said, well, they were busy. They had other things on their mind. Some who were on cell phones spoke louder as they passed Bell to compete with that infernal racket, And then there was a guy named Calvin. Calvin works for the General Services Administration, and he got to the top of the escalator, turned right, and headed out the door to the street. A few hours later, he had no memory that there had even been a musician anywhere in sight. There's nothing wrong with his hearing. He had earbuds in, and he was listening to his iPod, and ironically, the song that Calvin was listening to was Just Like Heaven by the British rock band The Cure. It's a song about a tragic, emotional disconnect. A man has found the woman of his dreams, but can't express the depth of his feeling for her until she's gone. It's about failing to see the beauty of what's plainly in front of your eyes. Well, the best seats in the house were at the shoeshine stand in the balcony. Only one person occupied one of those seats when Bell played. Terrence Holmes was his name. He's a consultant for the Department of Transportation. And he liked the music just fine, he said. But it was really about a shoeshine, after all. Holmes is up on that perch apparently quite a bit, and he's got a good relationship with the shoeshine lady. And he is a good listener, which is a skill that came in handy that day because the shoeshine lady was upset about something, and the music got her more upset. She complained that the music was too loud, and he tried to calm her down. Edna Souza is from Brazil. She's been shining shoes at the plaza for 6 years, and she's had her fill of street musicians there. When they play, she can't hear her customers, and that's bad for business. So she fights against them, and she points to the dividing line between metro property at the top of the escalator and the arcade, which is under the control of the management company that runs them all. And sometimes, Souza says, a musician will stand on the metro side, sometimes on the mall side. Either way, she's got him. On her speed dial, she has phone numbers for both mall cops and the metro cops. And the musicians seldom last long. Well, what about Joshua Bell? He was too loud, too. She hates to say anything positive about these pesky musicians, but she said, he was pretty good, that guy. It was the first time I didn't call the police. Well, Souza was then later surprised to learn that he was a famous musician, but she wasn't surprised that people rushed blindly by him. That was predictable, and she commented, if something like this happens in Brazil, everyone would stand around to listen. Not here. Souza nods toward a spot near the top of the escalator and says, a couple of years ago, a homeless guy died right there. He just lay down, died. The police came, an ambulance came. No one even stopped to see or slowed down to look. People walk up the escalator, they look straight ahead, mind your own business, eyes forward, everyone is stressed. Do you know what I mean? Well, W.H. Davies once wrote, what is this life if, full of care, we have no time to stand and stare? You know, we're busy. Americans have been busy as a people since at least 1831, when a young French sociologist named Alexis de Tocqueville visited America and was impressed, bemused, and slightly dismayed at the degree to which people were driven to the exclusion of everything else by hard work and the accumulation of wealth. Not much has changed. If you have seen or could still pop in a DVD of Koyaanisqatsi, the wordless film about the frenetic speed of modern life, film clips of Americans going about their daily business, but sped up until they resemble assembly line machines, robots matching lockstep to nowhere. Koyaanisqatsi is a Hopi word, and it means life out of balance. In his 2003 book, Timeless Beauty in the Arts and Everyday Life, British author John Lane writes about the loss of appreciation for beauty in the modern world. The experiment at Lafon Plaza may be symptomatic of that, not because people didn't have the capacity to understand beauty, but because, at least at the moment, it was irrelevant to them. This is about having the wrong priorities, Lane said. If we can't take time out of our lives to stay a moment and listen to one of the best musicians on earth, play some of the best music ever written, if the surge of modern life so overpowers us that we are deaf and blind to something like that, then what else are we missing? Well, the cultural hero of the day arrived at the plaza late. John Piccarello hit the top of the escalator just after Bell began his final piece. And in the video, you see Piccarello stop dead in his tracks, locate the source of the music, and then retreat to the other end of the arcade, and he takes up a position and does not budge for the next 9 minutes. And when he was called later in the day, he was first asked if anything unusual happened to him on his trip into work. And of the more than 40 people contacted by the Washington Post, Piccarello was the only one who immediately mentioned the violinist. And he said, yeah, there was a musician playing at the top of the escalator in the plaza. The reporter responded, haven't you seen musicians there before? And he said, not like this one. Well, what do you mean? This was a superb violinist. I've never heard anyone of that caliber. He was technically proficient with very good phrasing. He had a good fiddle, too, with a big, lush sound. I walked a distance away to hear him. I didn't want to be intrusive of his space. Really? The reporter replied. Really. It was that kind of experience. It was a treat, just a brilliant, incredible way to start the day. Well, Piccarello happens to know classical music. He is a fan of Joshua Bell, but he didn't recognize him. But he knew this was not some run-of-the-mill guy out there performing. And on the video, you can see Piccarello look around him now and then, almost bewildered. Yeah, other people just were not getting it. It just wasn't registering. And that was baffling to me, he stated. That's the end of the story, as reported. It was baffling to me. Well, like Samuel in the biblical story, John Piccarello heard. And like that day long ago when God spoke to Samuel, a divine word seems to be very rare in our time. And everyone is doing what is right in our own eyes. And something in me would like to believe that maybe one day we'll be able to stop and look